participants, panelists. We start in the scope of reform project of the Crisis Media Center to talk on the topic the pension reform in Ukraine risks to be suspended, and I'm giving the floor to the panelists. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm Marianna Onufryk from the Institute for Social and Economic Research, an expert on social policy issues. I would like to focus your attention on the following matter. Ukraine has concluded the memorandum with the IMF where certain liabilities were undertaken by Ukraine as concerned the economic issues and social issues to get the IMF assistance. One of the items of this memorandum and the structural landmark is such an benchmark which supposes some issues should be addressed within a certain established period of time. So by the end of last year, in December 2015, the matter of pension reform should have been resolved, but the draft law on the pension reform still has not been considered by the Parliament of Ukraine. In November 2015, both parties, signatories of the memorandum, had the discussion. Ukraine sought to change this landmark for two other landmarks. There is a special interest in formulations to postpone the pension reform until the strong foundation is built. This is very interesting articulation. However, not only the memorandum but also the coalition agreement of the Parliament and the strategy 2020 include the pension reform as one of the key points, and Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk and the President Poroshenko, they also made messages that they are going to start to launch the pension reform, but they have failed. You know that the budget has been adopted at the end of last year, and the expenditures, one of the items which was the biggest, it was the pensions item. 142 billion. Some funds are allocated from the pension fund to pay these pensions. The share of pension support is one of the biggest in the world in Ukraine in the national budget. Anyway, these figures has no influence on the welfare of the pensioners in Ukraine. Their subsistence is the lowest in Europe. So this matter is very urgent and should be addressed. How could it be addressed? In all developed countries where pensions are high enough and provide welfare of pensioners. They have defined contribution pension systems. That is why we signal an alert, and at this press briefing we would like to explain why defined contribution pension system is efficient and will be useful for every person and to the country in general. And I am giving the floor to Vitaliy Melnychuk, the president of investment company KINTO, who will give the outline of the history why we have had no changes for many years in the pension system. The pension reform in Ukraine started in 1998. 17 years ago, there was a decree of the President Leonid Kuchma, where he stated that taking into account the demographic situation in Ukraine and the economic situation, and in the scope of effective solidarity system of the pension system, it was impossible to ensure the welfare. That is why the decision was made to convert to a defined contribution pension system. So the new law on pensions was adopted in 2004, and it proposed three layers pension system, three-tiered pension system, but it remains only on paper. The reform has been postponed. The third tier started to operate, but without the second tier and without the focus on this matter on the part of the government. The second layer works poorly. You know that in solidarity system 12 million pensioners are covered, and very few people are covered by defined contribution pension system. The expenditures are very high in Ukraine, and at the same time the amounts of pensions are very small. What is the problem? Why the expenditures are small in other countries, but at the same time the citizens have rather high pensions? They receive from the national budget only half of the amount of their pensions, and the rest of their pension has been accumulated by them through their contributions into the pension funds, private pension funds. So the package was a structural landmark. After 17 years of ongoing pension reform, the integrated three-tier pension system should be formed. But now we hear from our leaders that the pension reform is postponed again. So the defined contribution pension component should be launched. It's a financial and economic issue. It is important for the country to have some internal resources which will be formed from such contributions of the citizens for their pensions. So we should think of our inner resources, inner reserves, the contribution pension resources in the world comprise $35 trillion in the pension marketplaces. And in our country, only 0.16% of GDP are comprised from the contributions pension system. The developed countries has actual successes thanks to their defined contribution pension systems. And in Ukraine, we should proceed with building and finalizing the three-tier pension system as it was defined. Some time ago, you know, the one movie was shot in 1980s. It was about Japan in 100 years ago. It was a legend about Narayama, the title of that movie. When an elderly person could not make any contributions into the profits of the country. The son of the old woman, he and of the old man, the son took his father, who was an elderly person by the time, he took his father and he brought him to the highlands, to the peak of the mountain, and abandoned him there because it was the system those days to abandon those persons who can't contribute to the welfare of the nation in Japan. Thank you. I would like also to talk about the other matter, how Ukrainians can trust into pension funds if we can't be confident even in the banks in Ukraine. So I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Tkach, who is a consultant on pension actuary systems. Thank you. For giving me the floor. I would like to start with our history. My colleague remembered Japan, but we should also remember Ukrainian pension history. The first pension cash offices in Ukraine appeared in 1857, when the railway companies organized first pension cash offices. And in 1817, in 1870s, the pension system for teachers was established, and the system of southern and eastern Ukraine was also established. Those days there were 100,000 members in the pension system of teachers in 19th century. This means that 40 years before the revolution of 1917, when Japanese people abandoned their parents at Narayama mountain peak. In our country, we had such pension funds which helped elderly people to survive. So we had the system of private pension assistance.
This was a long historical background, and I don't want to waste much your time on this, but let's come back to today's issues. From 19 from 2009, the third level, from 2001, the third level of the pension provision was launched in Ukraine, which is called private pension provision. As of today, we have up to 70 non-government pension funds, but efficiently out of that number, just a dozen probably works efficiently. Unfortunately, they cannot be seen as impressive as the private pension funds of the United States, where up to 50% of employed people are covered by these private pension funds. Of course, we cannot mention this, the figures similar to this, but some government institutions like National Bank of Ukraine back in 2006 founded that they are non-government pension funds, and now they have 1,200,000,000 hryvnia accumulated there. And if you take 12,000 employees of that institution, this is around 100,000 hryvnia at each individual account in average. And you can imagine that this will be a considerable addition to the state pensions of those employees. And just imagine that today the president assigns the Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine to sign the document which is called the Code of European Code of Social Provision. This code provides that a pensioner who is retiring should get at least 60% of her salary as pension provision. Well, today our pensioners today get between 20 and 30%. Actually, our own last resort is private pension provision, which would allow people to accumulate some other 20-30% of their salaries to get it as a pension later. Unlike other financial institutions, no pension funds rejected to carry out their commitments to pay the money, the due money. What are the advantages of private pension funds? The private pension fund gets money from the employees and employers, and it allows to ensure that accumulated money, that saved money, can grow. That is, we do not have other way out than to develop this supportive, this additional non-governmental pension provision system involving both employers and employees. Unfortunately, during the last 10 years, we do not move forward in this respect, while those countries which started the same pension reform simultaneously with us, like Poland, like Australia, and who had the same doubts as we had, they move forward very quickly. This encourages us to move forward more quickly. Thank you, Oleksandr. Now I would like to give the floor to Galyna Tretiakova, Director General of the Ukrainian Association of Ukrainian Insurance Federation. Quite often we hear that we do not have a stock exchange market in Ukraine. We do not have any means to make this money workable, so to say. All experts, all people who are sitting at this panel today, we are representatives of civil society, we are representatives of those people who have not more than 15 years before pension, and at the same time we represent younger people. I believe that civil society members, individual members of civil society, become more and more mature in terms of social realities. Today we have to conclude a new social agreement, new social treaty even, with the representatives of trade unions, with government authorities, etc. At the same time, today we witness the redistribution of taxes and redistribution of social contributions. From January 1st this year, single social contribution, single social tax dropped at least twice, and now the government ensures for us two types of insurance payments. This is unemployment insurance, this is a temporary disability insurance, this is the temporary illness insurance, and this is pension insurance, and also insurance in case of the loss of a breadwinner in a family. These all those payments should be part of the social treaty, new social treaty. They, on the one hand, the employers cannot hit Ukrainian economy. On the other hand, the employees should be insured. Reanimation package of reforms NGO offered to the government a package of draft laws aimed at reforming of this system. And we have also formulated requests to the politicians. On the one hand, we would like to see how those parties who pretend they have social protection aspects in their programs would support that package of bills. We would like to see how the government will finalize the 30 years long pension reforms, because the government has to balance the pension fund and with the actual possibilities of the country. So the government, which is called as technocratic, they should not forget that they have responsibility. The third, our request is to the President. We wish that our accumulations be protected. We wish the President to include pension fund and a reform of include the pension reform into the reform of public finance. Recently in Davos, the Minister of Finance mentioned that the raise of pension age won't happen this year, but the pension reform is not just the problem of pension age. The person should make personal accumulations, personal savings, which would enable those people should decide what pension age should be designed for this person individually. We wish to be wealthy, we wish to have our own accumulation. That is what we can do in the context reforms, and we request the President to prioritize this reform. What should be the design of the reform which we suggested? This should be savings, this should be property. Property means that our savings should be inherited by members of our household. We also should get a possibility to take bank credits in case of dangerous diseases. In case of having sufficient savings, we should have a possibility to take credits. we should be able to pay our mortgages. We should be able to pay for education of our people. So this design, the property, possibility to take bank loans, also the possibility to have the freedom of maneuver, so to say. Today, I'm not speaking in professional language. I'm speaking simple, plain language. All our experts can speak professional language. And when we hear that the financial sector is not ready, that's not true. This is one of the priorities of the National Reform Council, which is clearing out this system. The lack of assets where we could invest our money, that's again a myth. We have a lot of such enterprises. We can issue those securities which will preserve our savings. In case of financial crisis, we may lose. Of course, these risks are included into economic activities of all countries, but having all these savings, we will be able to overcome crisis and to survive and live normally after crisis. So this is our request to all the branches of power. Please privatize the pension system, because this will allow us to move forward. We have some 5 minutes.
Sidorenko Dmitro, Union. You told that no governmental funds have gone bankrupt in our country. At the same time, you told that only a part of the funds is operating now. When the pension funds were established, if you remember that era, it was 2015, 2018. It was a kind of economic growth those years. Legal entities established pension funds for a long-term perspective to accumulate contributions of their employees, and they suppose that the employees will pay their contributions. The third is that they also supposed that the defined contribution system will operate, and that professional pension systems will be launched, will come into operation. The less part of those systems became operational. This concerns some company-owned pension funds and some other associations which established their pension funds. For example, Ukreksimbank's pension fund exceeded 100 million hryvnias. Yes, some time ago, a legal entity established a pension fund, but but then later they elect money not only to maintain the pension fund but also to pay salaries and wages. That is why those pension funds are now not active. They still remain in operation, but they are not active. They are like pending. They are suspended for some time. Maybe they will be renewed, or maybe they will be closed, or they will join some other funds and form some joint ventures. We may take Poland as an example. They have about 15 non-governmental pension funds. And taking the banking system, there should be several dozen such financial institutions providing such pension services. The increase in the number of the pension funds will take place soon. We hope that professional pension funds will develop as well, because professional pension programs should be launched. There is no other way, so that people receive pensions for the years of their employment, for the length of employment. But this is a pension system member who should pay, but not the government, not the state. Thank you. You tell us about our future, but what about those persons who are retiring these days? When we elaborated the pension reform, we elaborated the first layer, the first tier, and we propose that the amount of pension depends on the amount of contributions which the person has already made into the pension fund. When the amount is too small, the government should add some money to the pension amount of a person, so that his or her pension is equal to the minimum wage. If a person has some securities in some stock fund, then no money will be paid by the government, by the national budget. While in the case where a person has paid contributions in rather high amounts, then the pension will be rather high as well. At the same time, we also address the matter of indexation. The indexation should be an automatic mode, and it should not depend on any MPs, government leaders or country leaders. Your pension should be indexed, and the government should meet its liabilities and its promises.
I would like to add, in the draft law 2767, we have the first level pension accumulation system, pay as you go. this is 26 billion hryvnia, which is needed. We can cut down some expenses when we hear that we do not have one joint register of pensioners, that we have non-productive expenses for maintenance of this pension system. Unfortunately, we have to finish, and I would like only to remind you that in the first 6 months of this year, the pension reform should be pushed forward, and